ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षु उन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मायं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरू श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सहगजातां सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं साजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखां स्वितंश्च नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति विकास स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे वंशकल्पातरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जय श्री प्रभुपाद। श्री गुरु गौरंगो जयता on speaking strongly in Srila Prabhupada's service. The quotation on the back cover, "You young boys," is from My Glorious Master by Burijan Das. The words conversation, lecture, letter, and purport indicate quotations from published editions by or involving Srila Prabhupada. Conversation subsumes all types of discussions with Srila Prabhupada, variously classified by the Bhaktivedanta archives as morning walks, press conferences, room conversations, etc. All such quotations are copyrighted by the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust International Inc. Unless otherwise stated, quotations from the Harmonist, the erstwhile magazine of the Gaudiya Mutt, were written by the editorial staff thereof. Published by Bhakti Vikas Trust, Surat, India. With great force, preach Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada Conversations, 1st March 1977. We go to the preface to the second edition. Intense discussion with devotees and further reflection about the topics of this book have led to this enhanced and slightly enlarged edition. A particularly valuable appendage is a recently published transcript of Srila Prabhupada's rejoinder to the criticism of an envious Oxford scholar. The overall response to the first edition has been encouraging, and I pray that this second edition will be equally well received and, more importantly, will inspire devotees to speak strongly and clearly in Srila Prabhupada's service. Preface to the first edition. I speak too strongly. People don't like it. I burn people out. Or so I am told. Some devotees warn me to tone down and speak in a way that will make everyone feel satisfied. I disagree. I have been disagreeing about this for years and will probably continue disagreeing until my last breath. Pig headed arrogance? Maybe. However, just as my critics advocate being mild with others, I request them to be mild with me. Kindly consider that my vitriol might not be impelled by ad hoc hominem nastiness, but by the desire to satisfy Srila Prabhupada, as will be explained in this book. The impetus to write this volume came after a preaching skirmish in London in the mid 1990s. Romapad Das, a disciple of Srila Rompad Das, a disciple of Sri Gopal Krishna Goswami, who is an old acquaintance of mine, had invited me to address a weekly meeting of Indian Vaishnav youth at a temple in East London. A footnote: Romapad Das has assented to the publishing of this anecdote and even furnished some details and amended some points that I had incorrectly recalled. End of footnote. Knowing my proclivity for straightforward speaking, Romapad Das cautioned me that the chairman of the temple was temperamental and should be dealt with carefully. After my lecture there, a middle aged Indian man asked, in a superficially reverent tone that indicated that he thought he knew a lot. Swamiji, you have spoken about bhakti. However, I have learned that Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga are all the same and led to the same goal. Can you please explain more? I posed a counter question, sir. Have you read the Bhagavad Gita? I pointed to the copy of Bhagavad Gita as it is that I was holding. The man mumbled something and repeated that he thought Jnana, Karma, and Bhakti were all the same. I raised the Gita in my hand and told him, Sir, first read this book and then speak. The man replied, But you said that only Krishna is God. However, we worship Murugan and Ganapati. What is wrong with that? I replied, Worshipping anyone other than Krishna is like placing a garland on a dead body. The man became furious and started jumping up and down as if he was about to hit us. His wife held his shirt to restrain him. Just then the Arati ceremony began. The man went to the notice board inside the temple and tore down and into pieces the poster that advertised the weekly ISKCON program and then shouted something in Tamil. Later, Romapad Das told me that the man had said, How dare this person come into our temple and tell us that we are worshipping dead bodies? He again tried to run at us as if to strike us, and again his wife held him back by his shirt. I gestured to Romapad Das and said, I think we should leave now. We went to a devotee's house nearby, where Romapad Das, upset over losing the program venue, told me that the angry man was the chairman of the temple. I responded, He thinks that the temple is his private property. He doesn't think that it belongs to Krishna. He thinks it belongs to him. Later, I also told Romapad Das that Krishna would give him a better location and added, You should find an independent place where you can preach Krishna consciousness without any compromise. The next year, when I again met Romapad Das in London, I asked him if he was still annoyed with me. He cheerfully replied that by Krishna's mercy, the youth group had indeed found a bigger and better hall for their programs, where they were able to freely speak the philosophy of Krishna, and resultingly, the group had significantly expanded. When Romapad Das had complained of what he perceived as my irony, I became perturbed, not because I regretted having angered that foolish man, not due to the fallout of my outburst, but because I was fed up with devotees objecting to my direct speaking. Having carefully studied Srila Prabhupada's books and listened to hundreds of his recorded talks, with a specific intent of imbibing his preaching mood and learning how he has responded to various propositions and challenges, I was confident that forceful, uncompromising presentation of Krishna consciousness was a valid way to follow him, and according to my understanding, the best way. I was also confident that the best way to worship Srila Prabhupada is by conveying to others the same message he gave us, and that any supposed worship of Srila Prabhupada is just a sham if not accompanied with living by and faithfully iterating his teachings. Consequently, being spurred by Romapad Das' discernment, I resolved to publish a justification of my stand for those who in the future would inevitably protest against my and others preaching Krishna consciousness in a manner meant to most closely follow that of Srila Prabhupada's. Hence, I composed this treatise and featured it in my publication, My Memories of Srila Prabhupada. Now, some 16 years later, I consider that there is even greater need to air that message than when it was first produced. Therefore, I have expanded and overhauled the original version and published it as this separate volume. In the course of revising it, while reflecting on the preaching tussles and controversies I have been involved in over the last 37 years since being admitted into ISKCON, I regretted that I had not been stronger, bolder, and more outspoken. I now find myself more convinced than ever of the crying necessity of the moment for silencing the aggressive propaganda of specific untruths that is being carried on all over the world. In other fitting, it is fitting that Speaking Strongly be my first publication after Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhava. By pursuing Speaking Strongly, devotees who appreciated the robust preaching of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati as depicted in Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhava, may further appreciate that was not meant to be imitated, such robustness was not meant to be limited to him, but imparted to all his followers, as it clearly was to his foremost disciple, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Almost certainly, speaking strongly will be controversial and many devotees will find it import difficult to accept. While expecting criticism, I request would be critics to first read the book in its entirety. I must apologize to whoever may become offended by any of my statements, but some things need to be said even at the risk of discomfiting others. Why so it is discussed herein? Admittedly, a seemingly contradictory case would be made for a more restrained approach in preaching, although it is doubtful that nearly as much evidence would be supplied to support that position as has been provided in Speaking Strongly. On Speaking Strongly in Srila Prabhupada's service is solidly based on more than 500 quotes from Srila Prabhupada's teachings and other authoritative sources, and further substantiated by the inclusion of several of the hundreds of recorded anecdotes that demonstrate its straightforwardness and provocativeness. These combinedly establish that my strong speaking, for which I am somewhat known within ISKCON, is not merely my own idiosyncrasy. These combinedly establish that my strong speaking, for which I am somewhat known within ISKCON, is not merely my own idiosyncrasy, but a sacred order from Srila Prabhupada that is meant to largely define his movement, notwithstanding his sometimes cautionary words. Hence, this tract is intended not only as a personal manifesto for addressing misgivings that devotees may have about my often abrasive style, but also to educate followers of Srila Prabhupada about his seemingly largely forgotten precept and practice of outright speaking, and to convince all present and future followers of Srila Prabhupada of the necessity for bold, strong worded preaching. It is particularly aimed at devotees who possess or aspire to possess full faith in the teachings of Shastra and the Gaudiya Parampara. Although such faith is a basic qualification of a Gaudiya Vaishnav, it is often alarmingly absent in the members of ISKCON today. Moreover, it offers guidelines for speaking pointedly and effectively in a manner consonant with Srila Prabhupada's desire. In the initial portion of this monograph, I attempt to show why devotees should speak strongly, clearly, and boldly, and how they can best serve Srila Prabhupada by doing so. Later, I add balance by examining and to some extent accommodating other approaches to preaching besides all out attack, yet also warning of the dangers of being too reticent. I discuss the pros and cons of speaking out with consideration of time, place, and circumstance, and respond to the oft mooted query, who is qualified to speak strongly? If my analysis of various angles and nuances of this subject seems repetitive, it is because I have tried to treat all common perspectives on them, many of which overlap. Furthermore, repetition of something is necessary in order that we understand the matter thoroughly without error. A measure of the effectiveness of this book will be the extent to which it engenders further discussion. Herein, several important topics have been broached but not developed comprehensively. Not least among them is the very purpose and mission of ISKCON. Also, in focusing primarily on strong speaking targeted at non devotees, this work offers only limited guidelines for contentious exchanges within Vaishnav circle. Not everything can be included in one volume. I pray that Krishna grant me the time, resolve, health, intelligence, and purity to complete the several other important theses that I plan for addressing these and other issues vital to the Krishna consciousness movement. My thanks are extended to those devotees who continue to selflessly help me in the production of my books. See acknowledgements and to the many more who have encouraged me by expressing appreciation of my writings. Special mention is also due to those devotees who, by their abhorrence of strong speaking, have afforded me sustained inspiration for the compilation of this treatise. I request all devotees to please pray that throughout this life and perhaps also in many more lifetimes, I may continue to speak strongly and to preserve in this vocation of writing, and that in so, sorry, I may continue to speak strongly and to persevere in this vocation of writing, and that in so doing, I may always aspire to be a humble instrument in the service of Srila Prabhupada and his followers. Furthermore, I pray to Srila Prabhupada and the previous acharyas that they continue to mercifully engage me in their mission, and that they may eternally inspire within me the intelligence to serve them in the manner they see fit. Bhakti Vikas Swami, 3rd January 2012. Prologue. I worship Srila Prabhupada. I worship Srila Prabhupada, who to a young man who declared, I am God, wrote back, You are not God, you are a dog. I worship Srila Prabhupada, who at the meeting of an influential Hindus in Japan suddenly shouted, Stop him! In the middle of their Mayavadi Guru's speech. I worship Srila Prabhupada, who matter of factly told a press reporter that the supposed astronauts could not travel to the moon because the moon is farther from Earth than is the sun. I worship Srila Prabhupada, who told us to make great propaganda on 2 points. The scientists have not gone to the moon and they cannot even manufacture a chicken egg. I worship Srila Prabhupada, who ordered that life comes from life be printed and widely distributed as an abashed assault on the cheating of the pseudoscientist. I worship Srila Prabhupada, who said, I cannot make any compromise. So long I shall live, I shall make no compromise. Why shall I mislead people? I worship Srila Prabhupada, who never tired of teaching, You are not this body, you are an eternal servant of Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead. Unconditional surrender to his lotus feet is the purpose of human life. I worship Srila Prabhupada, who knew our disease and repeatedly taught, give up sex. Sex is the binding force within this material world. I worship Srila Prabhupada, who declared, I am not anxious to go to Golok Vrindavan. I just want to expose all these rascals who pretend to be yogis and swamis. I worship Srila Prabhupada, who spoke of urinating on and kicking the face of a bogus avatar, openly called him a cheater during a press conference, and recommended to his disciples the somewhat milder tactic of throwing a pie into the rascal's face. I worship Srila Prabhupada, whose books are the perfect antidote for all forms of rascaldom and the best form of preaching. I worship Srila Prabhupada, the Lord of my life, the ambassador of the spiritual world, and a personal friend of Krishna. He never compromised in preaching, and I pray to him for the courage and conviction to eternally follow in his divine lotus footsteps. Continuing 1. Preaching means fighting. Srila Prabhupada fought for Krishna. He made no secret that his manifesto was meant to bring about a revolution in the impious life of a misdirected civilization. To effect this, he tirelessly promoted Krishna consciousness, also emphasizing the need to do so energetically, effectively, and aggressively. He challenged everyone in the world and every theory that even subtly opposed the acceptance of Krishna as a supreme personality of Godhead, and the maxim that the sole duty of every jiva is total mitigated surrender at Krishna's lotus, and the maxim that the sole duty of every jiva is total unmitigated surrender at Krishna's lotus feet. Quote, our fighting is against atheism. They say, there is no God. God is dead. I am God. You are God. We are fighting against these principles. So our fighting is very strong. Don't think that we are sitting idly. We have come here to fight with these atheists. We go everywhere. We are fighting with atheists all over the world. Atheists may be very expert in mental speculation and may so called great philosophers, but they can be defeated by a Vaishnav firmly situated in his conviction and God consciousness. Following in the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the preachers engaged in the service of ISKCON should be very expert in putting forward strong arguments and defeating all types of atheists. We have to fight. Otherwise, what is the meaning of preaching? If you think that everything will be accepted very easily, then what is the necessity of preaching? These rascals will not understand Krishna, just like the owl. The owl will never open his eyes to see that there is sunlight. However, you may say, Mr. Owl, please open your eyes and see the sun. No, there is no sun. I don't see. This is owl civilization. So you have to fight with these owls. You must be very strong, especially the sannyasis. We have to fight with the owls. We have to open their eyes by force. This Krishna consciousness movement is a fight against all these owls. Fight must go on. Fight cannot be stopped. So fight like a brave soldier. Krishna will help you. Don't make any compromise. No truce with these demons. Fight must be. End quote. In Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita 3.3.149, it is stated, Prema pracharana ara pashandadalana dui kare avaduta karena brahmana. For two purposes, to spread the cult of bhakti and to defeat and subdue the atheist, Lord Nityananda, the most dedicated devotee of the Lord, moved throughout the country. Prema Pracharana means preaching the cult of Bhakti. Pashanda Dalana means subduing atheist. In his purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada commented, Lord Krishna appears in every millennium for two purposes, namely, to deliver the devotees and kill the non devotees. His devotees also have two similar purposes, to preach the bhakti cult of Krishna consciousness and defeat all kinds of agnostic and atheist demons. Nityananda Prabhu carried out the order of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this way, and those who strictly follow Nityananda Prabhu perform the same activities. As a strict follower of Nityananda Prabhu, Srila Prabhupada was uncompromising, and to many must have seemed extreme in insisting that surrender to Krishna is the only goal of life, and that's all is nonsense, and that's all else is nonsense. He was not always belligerent, but his occasional aggressive tactics showed us the holy men sometimes have to be hellfire man. As Srila Prabhupada said, sometimes when we preach, we have to act like Kshatriyas. But it was not only sometimes that Srila Prabhupada would provoke and antagonize people. For instance, once in Japan, where few people were interested to assist the devotees, he blasted the Mayavad concepts of an Indian man who until then had been helping his disciples, thus alienating him. Later, Srila Prabhupada commented, Never mind, one day he will appreciate how we have chastised him for his rascaldom. Another time, speaking to a man in Kolkata, Prabhupada said, Krishna is the supreme Lord and all others are demigods. The man became little nervous and quoted a popular Bengali impersonalist who taught that all gods are all methods of worship are the same. Who taught that all gods and all methods of worship are the same. He's an upstart, Prabhupada said. This is not the teaching of the Gita. What is this other teaching? It is all utter confusion. If you go on speaking like this, the man said angrily, I will have to leave this place. Please don't criticize this Paramhamsa. Why not? Prabhupada said. He's a concoctor. The man got up and left, calling out, You don't know Krishna, as he left the room. Similar to this, on several occasions, Srila Prabhupada got into shouting matches, mostly with Indians. He described his preaching technique, quote, I'm a little temperamental. I used to use words like rascal and so on. I never compromised. They used to call it preaching with a pickaxe in one hand and a Bhagavatam in the other. That's how I preached. End quote. The Vedic tradition, although not one of the crusades, inquisitions, pogroms, or jihads, has nevertheless always been, until relatively recently, philosophically highly polemic. Why so was established by Adi Shankara. Quote, An opponent might say that indeed we are entitled to establish our own position, but there is no apparent point in a refutation of other opinions, a proceeding that produces nothing but hate and anger. We reply that there is a point. There is some danger that men of inferior intelligence will look upon Sankhya and similar systems as requisite for perfect knowledge, because those systems have a weighty appearance, have been adopted by authoritative persons, and profess to lead to perfect knowledge. They may therefore think that these systems, with their obstruse arguments, were propounded by omniscient sages, and on that account might have faith in them. For this reason, we must endeavor to demonstrate the intrinsic worthlessness of such systems. End quote. All great Vaishnavacharyas, particularly Madhva and his discipular adherents, were unabashed in dismantling the faulty philosophical constructs of their adversaries. Primary among them were Adi Shankara and his followers. Madhva established practically as the modus operandi of his sampradaya what Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati would later term the chopping technique. Later, a devotee who is firmly grounded in service to the truth speaks clearly and forcefully in a matter that offers no scope for wrong conclusions. He thoroughly criticizes all mistaken ideas, even those that have had long lasting, wide acceptance among respected persons. All of his refutations were backed by evidence to benefit others so that they can unmistakably distinguish reality from illusion and without any lingering reservations also apply themselves to the service of the truth. Similarly, Sri Ramanujacharya and his followers achieves eternal glory by risking their lives in a speaking frankly. Footnote. For a summary of such pastimes of Ramanujacharya and his followers, see the Acharya's unequaled and unsurpassed greatness in Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhav, Volume 3, page 53. End of footnote. Such genuinely Acharya not only accept honor and facilities or only talk nicely about Krishna, but also are committed to uphold against all opposition the principles of their sampradaya, which entails speaking vigorously, not merely within one's own group, but also venturing out to deliver the message of Godhead to the misguided and often inimical populace. Srila Prabhupada's own spiritual master was a legendarily staunch Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, who preached so unreservedly that his enemies tried to kill him. He shocked the intellectuals of the day by his fierce, totally uncompromising condemnation of anything less than unmotivated devotional service to Krishna, who alone is to be recognized as the supreme personality of Godhead, the proper object of worship. Many responded by openly questioning his credentials as a sadhu. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati replied through numerous speeches and articles explaining why a true sadhu must speak strongly. He went on speaking contentiously throughout his life, not caring for outside opposition, not even with his own disciples' dissatisfaction. Footnote. Descriptions of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's legendary staunchness appear throughout Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhava. For his stance on strong speaking, see The Revolutionary Preacher of the Truth, Volume 1, page 135. End of footnote. Begin of quote. When my Guru Maharaj was present, even big scholars were afraid to talk with his beginning students. My Guru Maharaj was called living encyclopedia. He could talk with anyone on this any subject. He was so learned. So we should be like that as far as possible. No compromise. Ramakrishna, avatars, yogis, everyone was enemy to Guru Maharaj. He never compromised. Some god brothers complained that his preaching was chopping technique and it would not be successful. But we have seen that those who criticize fell down. For my part, I have taken up the policy of my Guru Maharaj no compromise. All these so called scholars, scientists, philosophers who do not accept Krishna are nothing more than rascals, fools, lowest of mankind, etc. End of quote. Once a senior disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati complained that a young brahmachari was spoiled a preaching engagement by openly vilifying a popular charlatan. The meeting was dissolved into chaos. It was terrible publicity. But instead of rebuking that brahmachari, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati commented, he has done well. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati appreciated the combative spirit. Some Prakata Sahajiyas fault Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, claiming that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not so confrontational. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati explained that although Mahaprabhu by no means entered into barren dogmatic debates, he established his position by meaningful scriptural grapples with the most erudite philosophers of the day. During the time of Mahaprabhu, within learned circles, arguments were conducted according to exacting Vedic rules of logic and hermeneutics, and participants both understood and accepted when they had been defeated. But nowadays, such principled debate is largely unknown. Almost everyone thinks himself qualified to express opinions on various issues, even without having thoroughly studied them, and does not even understand when he had been defeated. Therefore, in the present era, in serving the mission of Mahaprabhu by awaking people to his message, or recent acharyas have prescribed a more forceful and shocking approach than that personally adopted by Mahaprabhu. As Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati stated, the aggressive pronouncement of the concrete truth is the crying necessity of the moment for silencing the aggressive propaganda of specific untruths that's been carried on all over the world. Some devotees may claim that although chopping techniques were suitable in the time of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and Srila Prabhupada, they are no longer suitable today. But actually, those words of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's in 1931 are eternal beacons to preachers in this world, which is populated by an overwhelming majorities of jiva intent on forgetting Krishna, plus a tiny minority trying to arrest the perverted current tide and redirect it towards the eternal source. What was crying necessity in 1931 is now even more pronounced, and thus Srila Prabhupada, as a best servant of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, having fully imbibed the mood of his spiritual master, fought against the demonic civilization to establish Krishna as a supreme absolute truth. Srila Prabhupada avowed himself to be the greatest enemy of modern civilization and added, "It is a regular war declared." The war that Srila Prabhupada declared was against all Swamis, all yogis, all pseudo religionists, all politicians, all leaders, all scientists. Our business is to protest against all of them. Very unhappy, hard task. Once, when disciple pleaded that he rest and recuperate his health, Srila Prabhupada gravely responded, "I want the benediction to go on fighting for Krishna like Arjuna." And fight Srila Prabhupada did, even from the outset of his ministration in the West. For instance, when he became livid at the impersonalism of his earliest followers. Swamiji, Srila Prabhupada particularly criticizes the Radha Krishnan commentary to the Bhagavad Gita, verse 9.34, in which Krishna tells Arjuna, "Engage your mind always in thinking of me, offer obeisances, and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me." Upon this verse, Radha Krishnan comments that it is not to the personal Krishna that we have to surrender, but to the unborn, beginningless, eternal who speaks through Krishna. Just see, Swamiji says, when this verse and commentary was read at the evening class, I told you Dr. Radhakrishnan was an impersonalist. This Mayavadi philosophy is worse than atheism. This Mayavadi philosophy is worse than atheism. We are not really certain what Mayavadi means. When our Swamiji says that impersonalists are called Mayavadis because they consider Krishna's transcendental, eternal body to be Maya or illusion. For them, he says, the impersonal Brahman is the absolute truth, and Krishna is subordinate to Brahman. But in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he is the supreme absolute truth, and that the impersonal Brahman is subordinate to him. Surprising us all, Keith, later initiated at Kirtananda, rallies to the defense of Dr. Radhakrishnan. I think he is right, he says. After all, Krishna is in all of us. So if we surrender to the unborn within us, then we attain the absolute truth. To support his view, Keith quotes Shankara and Huang Po, Buddha and Christ, Spinoza and Saint Paul. Swamiji just sits on the dais, and for the first time, I notice him turns red. This is surprising considering his golden complexion. When Keith pauses, Swamiji asks, "Are you finished?" Keith isn't finished. He talks on what the self, and the one mind, quoting liberally from various scriptures before winding down. Are you finished? Swamiji asks again. Yes, Keith says. So you have understood what we have been saying, that Krishna is God? Yes, Keith says. And that worship is due God? Yes, Keith says. Suddenly, Swamiji, red and furious, stands up. Then why do you want to take it away from Krishna? He roars, shaking the small storefront. It's Krishna! It's Krishna! He slams his hand down on the lectern. It's no unborn within Krishna. It's Krishna. We all sit stunned, as if a lion had pounced on the dais. Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead, is directly telling Arjuna, to me, worship me. And Dr. Radhakrishna says, it is not to the person Krishna, but to some void. Just see what a nonsense rascal. Do you want to worship some unborn void instead of Krishna? Krishna is the absolute truth. His body, mind, self are absolute. And he says, think of me, be devoted to me, worship me. And even Sankara says, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govindam. And even Sankara says, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. Worship Govinda, worship Govinda, worship Govinda. Your nonsense will not save you at death. And yet this rascal wants to take it away from Krishna. Do you want to follow such a rascal? Krishna says, worship me. Do you not understand? Then why are you saying it is not to Krishna? Why? Why not to Krishna? We all look at Keith as if he had suddenly turned into an untouchable. This surprises us all, since usually he is so expert. Yet he simply articulated the Mayavadi mentality of us all. We sit in stunned silence, not daring to venture further. Did you see how red Swamiji got? I asked Veli, later initiated as Umapati. Afterwards, boy, was he angry? But he's right, Valley said. All the commentators try to avoid Krishna. You have read Bhagavad Gita before. Until meeting Swamiji, did you ever think of worshipping Krishna? I have to admit that it never crossed my mind. Thus, we discover that we are also Mayavadi impersonalist, addicted to inactivity and hedonism. We know nothing of spiritual personality and action. Swamiji has to shout loud indeed to make us understand that God is a person and that action for his sake is on the spiritual platform. This is Bhagavad Gita's most essential message, Swamiji says the next morning. Lord Krishna tells Arjuna to fight, but he says, do it for me. When we work for Krishna and chant his name, we are already liberated and living on the spiritual plane. Just as a person feels heat when he touches something hot, you are liberated as soon as you enter into the service of Krishna. We all feel as though we have just touched something very hot. There's no doubt that our long slumber is being disturbed. We are declaring war, Swamiji says. War on Maya. By declaring war in his storefront, Srila Prabhupada risked losing his fledgling flock, the only followers, if at that stage they could be considered thus, that he had after months in America. But he instead won them in a manner that would not have been possible had he not unreservedly exorcised their deep rooted misconceptions. Shortly after being initiated, Umapati Das told Srila Prabhupada that he could not accept his assertion that a family should live together as if strangers in a hotel. Srila Prabhupada then showed him the relevant statement from the Bhagavad Gita, but Umapati remained dissatisfied and soon thereafter left the association of the devotees. When, after 9 months, Umapati returned, Srila Prabhupada told him that because another devotee had left shortly before Srila Prabhupada was worried that Umapati's departure would catalyze a spate of further defections. At that time, Srila Prabhupada's entire movement consisted of approximately 20 disciples. Yet, even though faced with the prospect of losing all or most of them, Srila Prabhupada never budged from the truth. Mukunda Goswami, who also was among the earliest disciples of Srila Prabhupada, similarly stated that from nearly the very beginning he realized that Swamiji was not just a teacher but a fighter who really did not like impersonalism and who would never compromise. Srila Prabhupada never modified his stance. In 1972, at a public lecture in Glasgow, a young man stood up and loudly declared, "I am God." To which Srila Prabhupada roared back, "You are not God, you are dog." At a Pandal program in Delhi, in the midst of his lecture, Srila Prabhupada called a belligerent American hippie onto the stage. "Have you realized yourself?" the young man demanded. "Have you realized the soul in the innermost depths of your being?" "Yes," Srila Prabhupada replied. At first, the man was taken aback, but then he again challenged. "Now you tell me another thing. When was the Bhagavad Gita written?" "Now you answer my question," Srila Prabhupada said. "What is the process of receiving knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita?" "No," the young man retorted. "You tell me, when was Bhagavad Gita written? In your lecture, you said 5,000 years ago. But according to the other Swamis, it was written only 1500 years ago. Answer my question. I ask you first." Srila Prabhupada raised his voice angrily. "I am not your servant. I am Krishna's servant. You must answer my question." A heated argument began, with the hippie yelling at Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada arguing back. Finally, the devotees removed the boy from the stage. The incident confused the audience. Many people began to leave. "Why did your Guru Maharaj become angry?" some of them demanded from the devotees. "He should have answered the man's question." Some of the civic leaders supporting the Pandal program also became upset, fearing Srila Prabhupada had made an unfavorable impression on the public. Those who were devotional, however, remained in their seats to hear further what Prabhupada has to say. To the devotee, it was inconceivable. Why had Srila Prabhupada, in the middle of his talk, invited a crazy hippie onto the stage, given him a microphone and a seat, and then argued with him to the point of yelling and shouting, and all before an audience of 20,000? Bhavananda, one man who had helped organize the pandal, protested, "Oh, Swamiji gotten angry. This is not good." But Srila Prabhupada seemed to have done it purposefully. He had spoken for a long time that evening on how to understand the Bhagavad Gita, and then he had this hippie brought on the stage. It was bewildering to us. We couldn't figure it out. Giriraj. Srila Prabhupada was actually using the entire incident to illustrate the process of understanding Bhagavad Gita. After the man left, Prabhupada completed his lecture by stating that one must approach Krishna or Krishna's representative with a submissive attitude, by serving and inquiring, not simply asking challenging questions. The whole incident has illustrated this point. Yadubar. Many in the audience misunderstood the incident. It caused a split, but those who understood that what Srila Prabhupada had done could see that this hippie was a rascal, and this had been a time for transcendental anger against his nonsensical opinions. Teji S. After everything was over, Prabhupada told us, just as the gopis were lusty for Krishna, Arjuna would also get angry for Krishna. So it is not bad that a devotee becomes angry for Krishna. But many people in the crowd could not understand this point, how a devotee is not impersonal. End quote. Srila Prabhupada could have dismissed the hippie with a terse comment, but he did not. He called the hippie onto the stage and publicly engaged in a shouting match with him. In this instance, Srila Prabhupada, the empowered representative of Krishna, chose to fight on stage with a hippie, even though it was likely that many attendees would disapprove. While touring America in 1975, Srila Prabhupada caused another uproar by stating on television that women are less intelligent than man. Several female reporters came to interview Srila Prabhupada, who remained unfazed even after one of the journalists angrily stormed out of the room. The press coverage went from bad to worse, but Srila Prabhupada stood by his principles. A critic might contend that Srila Prabhupada could have handled those situations. A critic might contend that Srila Prabhupada could have handled those situations in a more sensitive and careful manner. Although on many occasions Srila Prabhupada did deal tactfully, he often chose to fight, sometimes by all out attack. Journalist, I think an awful lot of our readers and an awful lot of people in United States are terribly confused with the many people who claim to be gurus and gods and who pop up in this country one after the other, and they say that Srila Prabhupada, I can declare that they are all nonsense. Journalists, I wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit. Srila Prabhupada, I can say furthermore, they are all rascals. End quote. In the beginning days of Krishna consciousness in the West, a group of budding devotees complained to Srila Prabhupada that he was too hostile against impersonalism, false yogis, and so on. Srila Prabhupada responded, a preacher must attack. Srila Prabhupada not only fought, but he is also commanded his disciples to fight. Srila Prabhupada not only fought, but he also commanded his disciples to fight. Quote, you young boys should also preach strongly. You must learn the truth. Mame vamsho jiva loke and preach strongly, as I am doing all over the world. Preach the truth just as Krishna is speaking in Bhagavad Gita and Shrimad Bhagavatam, and do not compromise Krishna's word. These are all nonsense because simply these are all nonsense, simply nonsense. Muda. Of course, we use this word muda and people become very angry. But what can we do? Laughter. The mudas must be explained as mudas. And because the mudas are going as intelligent, therefore there is a chaotic condition. So our Krishna consciousness movement is to become intelligent, not to remain mudas. And to expose these rascals mudas, that is our Krishna conscious movement. That is our Krishna consciousness movement. So you must be prepared. While making propaganda, expose these mudas. That is one of the services of Krishna. Don't remain foolish. Wherever there is required, fight with these mudas and tell them rightly, straightforwardly, that you are mudas. Thank you very much. Footnote, although the word propaganda is often used in a negative sense, indicating widespread dissemination of untruth, Srila Prabhupada generally used this word in a positive sense to indicate the widespread disseminating of truth. The Krishna consciousness movement declares wars against bogus incarnations. The bogus propaganda put out by people claiming to be God has killed God consciousness all over the world. Members of the Krishna consciousness movement must be very alert to defy these rascals who are presently misleading the whole world. One such rascal, known as Pundraka, appeared before Lord Krishna, and the Lord immediately killed him. Of course, those who are Krishna's servant cannot kill such imitation God, but they should try their best to defeat them through the evidence of Shastra, authentic knowledge received through the disciplic succession. Our aim is to destroy the position of the mundane scholars. We have to prove to the world that anyone who is not Krishna conscious is a dushkritna and Muda. You can eulogize your Guru Maharaj, but you have to learn how to face the public and be strong to defend yourself. That is success. Not simply by praising your Guru Maharaj. You will praise your Guru Maharaj. That is not very difficult. But be victorious over the opposing elements. Then you will praise your Guru Maharaj nicely. At home, you can praise your Guru Maharaj, and Guru Maharaj will be satisfied. Oh, my disciples are praising me. That is good, respectful. That is a qualification, but you have to fight. Then your Guru Maharaj will be glorified. I am very glad that you are challenging all of these so called Swamis and Gurus. My Guru Maharaj appreciated devotees who boldly present our Vaishnava philosophy. We must take advantage of every opportunity to defeat these rascals and drive them away. So please continue this strong attitude. Krishna. Very strong preach, very strongly preach this philosophy to the student class of men. That is the greatest service. No other movement or cult has such vast background of authority. So we are not afraid to challenge anyone and everyone to defeat their philosophy on the basis of that authority. These rascals are passing as scientists and philosophers and thus misleading persons. This is our greatest grief. Therefore, I am requesting you all just make a plan to face these rascals and defeat them. They are misleading the whole human society. Now, the Krishna consciousness movement should take this turn. Krishna has two engagements Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam, giving protection to the sadhus, the devotees, and killing the demons. Of the two engagements, his killing of the demon was his major occupation. If we examine how much time he devoted to killing and how much time he devoted to protecting, we shall find that he devoted more time to killing. Similarly, those who are Krishna conscious should also kill, not by weapons, but by logic, by reasoning, and by education. If one is demon, we can use logic and arguments to kill his demoniac propensities and turn him into a devotee, a saintly person. Especially in this present age, Kali Yuga, people are already poverty stricken, and physical killing is too much for them. They should be killed by argument, reasoning, and scientific spiritual understanding. End quote. Like his own Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada also was inclined towards his bolder preachers. He wanted them to be lion like, to challenge, fight, and win. Quote, you have understood our philosophy rightly, that we boldly challenge anyone, philosophers, scientists, educationists, to understand our philosophy, and for that, we enter without hesitation into the heart of the biggest cities and preach to everyone the message of Lord Chaitanya, who himself was like the lion in strength. I wish that every one of you should be lion's descendant. Our Lord Krishna assumed the form of a lion and killed the atheist Hiranyakashipu. And by disciplic succession, we should also kill all impersonalist atheists. Absolutely, there is no Krishna consciousness for the impersonalist. Best preachers will not stand by idly and listen to any nonsense ideas or Mayavadis. The whole world is running on a false theory that life is born out of matter. I think we can stop here, Prabhus, because I think it's 9:33. We'll read more from page 17 later. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today's reading of on Speaking Strongly in Srila Prabhupada's service. Uh, Again, apologize that there was some mix-up in the schedule, but we'll again assemble tomorrow and continue the reading of this beautiful literature compiled by His Holiness Bhakti Vikasa Swami Maharaj. Thank you so much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitnam pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.